You know, art is a topic that I don't think we utilize enough when we talk about activist spaces. And it's kind of a shame because every time we bring the art into it, it always turns out really well. You know, it rocks. I mean, we got these banners behind us, these sunflowers that have come from protests in the past. And it's really incredible the talent we have in our activist community. And I'm so glad to be able to lift up some of that talent tonight on this stage. There's so much more that's not covered, but we'll do more of these hopefully if they're popular, and we'll make sure that all the artists get included at some point. We're also very happy to welcome to Detroit Mustafa Santiago Ali, who was with the Hip Hop Caucus, now is with the NWF as their Vice President of EJ. I appreciate Mustafa giving us an excuse to do a really awesome event like this. You know, he was actually on the West Side and said that he wanted to specifically come do something in Detroit. And we were really pumped about that, so we put together a little event proposal, and he said, that sounds awesome. And you know, we're glad to be able to host him here. He stayed extra time, guys, just to be with us tonight. Now I'm going to get to him in just a second. To kind of run a show tonight, we're going to hear from Mustafa. We'll have a little bit of time to ask him some questions. We're going to hear from a women's hip-hop collective called We Found Hip Hop. We're going to hear some of the poetry stylings of Tawana Petty back there, Detroit-based poet. And we're going to close it out with a little discussion. We're going to have a couple people from labor, from the Sunrise Movement, from the NAACP, and they're just going to kind of give us some thoughts to leave us tonight, and then we'll have a little audience discussion, and we'll close it out. Now, before we get to that, I do want to do some shout-outs, because this event does not come together with one person, and I want to thank Tom Zarafa, who's doing the sign-in. I want to thank Jordan, doing the live stream. Jan, who made sure we had refreshments tonight, so you can thank her for that. Yeah, you get a big one for that. Rhonda Anderson is not here, but she took Mustafa on a tour, a toxic tour of the 48217 zip code, as we know is a very sensitive environmental justice area earlier. And she's got to be in New Orleans, so she's literally doing this, and then she's got to hop on a train, so we appreciate her hustling to make sure that was part of the program today. I want to shout out Teresa, Vicky, Aleisha, Ebony, Dr. Leonard, and all the people in 48217 who have fought for environmental justice. Amazing, inspirational work. That needs some recognition. Fred, Lon, Jim, Frank, people who have been in our Beyond Coal campaign for a couple of years fighting. And finally, the amazing groups that we ally with, Solidarity, Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition, Sunrise, Jobs of Justice, Interfaith Power Light, Ecology Center, IMEAC, Good Jobs, and so many. I could just go on forever, but we thank you for all that you do. And, you know, honestly, I wish I could do more than just shout you up on the stage, but I appreciate it. Now, we're gonna introduce Mustafa here and talk a little about the Green New Deal. You know, we're living in unprecedented times. Homeownership, black homeownership right now in Detroit is at a record low. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Communities in 48217 are dealing with, like what we said, the toxic air, and the middle class is losing ground with runaway wealth inequality that is benefiting the top 1% and nobody else. And the Green New Deal talks about how it's all connected in some ways. You know, there was an activist called Audre Lorde, who I hope most of you in the room might know, who said, there is no such thing as a single-issue struggle because we do not live single-issue lives. Malcolm knew this, Martin Luther King Jr. knew this. Our struggles are particular, but we are not alone. We are not perfect, but we are stronger and wiser than the sum of our errors. And I think that's a powerful quote. So I just wanted to bring it into the room and say that's what's inspiring me to talk about the Green New Deal and why some of this stuff is all connected, because we need to change hearts and minds and mobilize people if we're gonna take back our country. So let's get into Mustafa to kick us off. Mustafa is a co-host of the was a co-host of the Hip Hop Caucus. He's been with the Environmental Protection Agency, was with the Environmental Protection Agency 24 years, heading on to the National Wildlife Federation. As said, he's a renowned national speaker, trainer, and facilitator specializing in social justice issues, focused on revitalizing our most vulnerable communities. Throughout his career, Mr. Ali has conducted over 1,000 presentations across the country, including speeches, guest lectures, and trainings. And he has also worked with over 500 domestic and international communities to secure environmental health and economic justice. Let's give a big Detroit welcome to Mustafa Santiago Ali. Thank you.
I'm good. I said, can I get a beat? She was like, yeah, you can. How's everybody doing? It's good to be back home. Detroit is a second home to me. Spent some time here when I was much younger. By the time they got done with that bio, I thought I was about 90 or 95 years old. They was telling it. But it's an honor to be back home. I'm not going to talk too long, but I just wanted to kind of share a few things with you as we continue to sort of fight for and move toward justice. And when Rhonda blessed me with the opportunity to hear some people's truth and experience what they continue to experience on a daily basis, it got me to thinking. And y'all know, most of the folks who know me, I've been doing this for a long time, since I was like 16 years old. And sometimes when you slow down, because we live in a world that moves so fast, it makes us begin to reconnect with, one, why we do what we do, but two, also the truth and reality of what folks are dealing with on a daily basis. And I started to think about, how did we get here? Have you ever done that? Because it's 2019 now. And sometimes you turn on the TV and you're thinking to yourself, well, this is like 1940, 1950 types of stuff that folks are dealing with. It's 2019. So then I had to slow down and go back to sort of the roots of where we began to make some of these mistakes so that we don't make them again, but yet we still need to honor them. So in all these thousands of presentations I've done, one, I always honor my mother and my grandmother were the rocks that I stand on, and who blessed me with an understanding that I was going to have some tough days. How many folks in the room have ever had a tough day? Raise your hand. Everybody look around. So not one hand not go up. Usually there's that one person who's over there, they don't want to raise their hand because they're like, I am not into participatory types of activities. So I just tell everybody to get up and run over to them and touch them real quick. That changes the energy. And so my mother and my grandmother told me that because you're going to have some tough days, you better figure out how you're going to deal with them. And I've been one raised in a family of ministers and others, so I understood the power of positive energy and how it can transform individuals, it can transform spaces and places that we go into that sometimes are not the most inviting. Sometimes if you've worked on civil rights issues, if you've worked on social justice issues, if you work on environmental justice issues, if you work on gun reform rights, you're going to move into some spaces where everybody ain't gonna love you, where everybody doesn't necessarily want to hear what you have to say, but you better find a way to make sure that the energy that's surrounding you moves you through that in a safe and protective way. So every day since I've been 16 years old, except for twice, I'll share with y'all the 2 times that I didn't do it, and you can blame me for some of the things that have happened in this country. I get up, I look in the mirror, and I say I'm blessed and highly favored. Now I know I'm not in the South, I know I'm back in Detroit. We're going to try it anyway. Everybody say, I'm blessed.
I'm blessed.
Look at Detroit. Hold up now. We're going this side to see what it feels like. And highly favored.
And highly favored.
All right, we're going to come together as a community real quick. I'm blessed.
I'm blessed.
And highly favored.
And highly favored.
And we are. Sometimes we forget that we are blessed because we have the opportunity to work on issues of our time. We have the opportunity to actually work on issues that get to help change lives. They get to help to protect lives. They get to help to bring hope back into communities, into individuals' lives. And that is powerful. But that also means that there's a huge amount of responsibility in that space. That if you ain't gonna do it right, please don't tell people that you work on environmental justice. If you're not going to do it right, please don't tell folks that you work on climate justice. There are a whole bunch of other issues out there that you can work on. If you're not going to be truthful, if you're not going to be authentic, and if you're not going to be committed for the long run. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So as I had that quiet moment, and again, I will always be completely and 100% connected to Rhonda and the work that she has done, because I know she hasn't always gotten the support that she deserves. I started to think about how we got here. So let's be truthful about some things as we talk about how we're going to fix some things and move forward. And the first part of that is one, honoring the ground that we stand on. So this is indigenous ground that we stand on. There has been other blood that's been spilled, but we need to honor our indigenous brothers and sisters who this was theirs. And they protected it. So, first principle of the environmental justice movement, there are 17 principles. The first one is honoring Mother Earth. And indigenous brothers and sisters and others were a driver in making sure that that was that first principle that those of us who are authentic in this work actually work from. So that took me to, how did we get to where we are today? The first part of that is we need to recognize that indigenous brothers and sisters were removed from their land. In many instances, their culture was taken away from them. And in many instances, they weren't allowed to do some of the practices that they normally had done. So for those of us who work on food justice issues, there was food justice issues happening at that time. For those of us who are sometimes working on how do we rebuild communities, well, their communities were taken away. Luckily, many of those brothers and sisters held on as tightly as they could to many of the things that made them who they were. And unfortunately, indigenous brothers and sisters are not the only ones who have gone through this challenge. If we're going to have real talk, and y'all all right with real talk? Oh, yeah. All right. Because we know when African slaves came to this country, people placed them on plantations, whether in the Caribbean or in South America. There was some in Central America most people don't talk about, or here in this country, given some of the most dangerous jobs to do. So when we talk about jobs and justice, let's go back to where it really started, where people were out in the fields working 14, 16 hours a day in 100-degree temperatures. And folks about to see that again as climate change really kicks in, right? Yep. People were taken away from their traditional practices and foods. We see a reoccurring theme. Of course, folks weren't getting paid either for the work that they were doing. But that's a part of this narrative that we have to honor. Sometimes we don't talk about our Asian and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters and their contributions also to this country. So if you look at Chinese Americans and you want to have these conversations that folks in Washington are now having around infrastructure, let's talk about who helped to build the railroad system in this country that moved people and product across the country.